The JD Vance show continues, because after he went to Munich, JD Vance then went to Ukraine. No, that's not true. I think he met with him on the side of the Munich Security Conference, or he went with him to Ukraine. One or the other. Either way, he met with JD Vance and a team around him, which I believe included Marco Rubio and others. And they were presented with a reformed version of a document that was presented to Zelensky on Wednesday by Trump's Treasury Secretary. Now, this deal that was proposed had to do with the mineral rights that Donald Trump's been talking about. He says, if you want more aid from the United States, even though we made this commitment in the 90s, that if you give up your atomic weapons, that we were going to back you up. Now we're adding, more asterisks. Now we're adding, new clauses. We've changed the terms of the agreement, and you better pray we do not change them again. It's one of those deals. And now we're asking for resources in return for continuation of aid. And the deal that was given on Wednesday, the report is that Zelensky didn't like it, that it was bad, or they didn't like it in some way, that they're unsatisfied with it, and they felt boxed in, as if that there was a lot of pressure on Zelensky to take this deal and to sign away these mineral rights to the United States very quickly. And the number that we keep hearing and keep circulating is 50%. This is what officials are saying, 50%. Let's read a little bit about the deal right here from Reuters. It was a Reuters exclusive. Talks between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. Vice President JD Vance ended in Munich. It was in Munich. On Friday, without an announcement of critical minerals deal that is central to Kiev's push to win the backing of President Donald Trump. Kiev came back to the U.S. earlier with the revised draft agreement of the deal that could open up its vast resources of key minerals to U.S. investment, amid concerns in Kiev over a U.S. version that was presented to Ukraine on Wednesday. Our teams will continue to work on the document, Zelensky wrote on X, adding that he had a good meeting with Vance and that Kiev was ready to move towards, as quickly as possible, a real and guaranteed peace. Two members of the Ukrainian delegation told Reuters that some details still needed working out. It was not immediately clear what the sticking point was, but Ukraine is pressing for robust security guarantees from Europe and the United States that would protect it from Russia in the future if a peace deal is reached. Zelensky set out the contours of the deal in a Reuters interview last week, unfurling a map showing numerous mineral deposits and saying he was offering a mutually beneficial partnership to develop them jointly and not, quote unquote, giving them away. The minerals, and where Trump has requested like 500 billion. The minerals in question would include rare earth varieties, as well as titanium, uranium, and lithium, among others. Trump, who is not committed to continuing vital military assistance to Ukraine, has said he wants $500 billion in rare earth minerals from Kiev, and that Washington support, in order to get Washington support secured. Asked earlier if there would be a deal agreed on Friday, Vance had said, let's see. Well, now we know the deal had not been agreed. Ukraine was presented with a draft accord drawn up by the United States on Wednesday when the Treasury Secretary traveled there. Now here is the interesting part. Meeting for 90 minutes with a bipartisan group of U.S. senators behind closed doors in Munich, Zelensky voiced concerns about the U.S. proposal presented on Wednesday, three sources familiar with his presentation said. He felt he was being asked unreasonably to sign something he hadn't had a chance to read. One of them said, on the condition of anonymity, I don't think he appreciated being given a take it or leave it thing. A take it or leave it thing. Mind you, Trump just got in there. He said that he had a plan. He had a plan. He had a plan, and it was going to be done in 24 hours. 24-hour peace plan. That ends up being a crock of shit, just campaign speak. Okay, we knew that at this channel, but I know it might be hard to know for somebody who might not know everything about Trump, but for a lot of Ukrainians, some people took that seriously. And they were like, oh my God, maybe I can go home, maybe I could do, and they took it seriously. And now the war is just dragging on and 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 on. And as this continues to drag on, and Ukraine tries to find the method to the madness of Donald Trump here, and they haven't been sent any new aid shipments. The sanctions that we're talking about have not been implemented. There's been all of these, what seem like public concessions of territory, NATO membership, a lack of U.S. troops in Ukraine, building a deterrence effect. All these public concessions, Ukraine not being at the table, Trump refusing to say if Ukraine is vital for negotiations, as in them being at the table, which the Russians have said for preconditions that the Ukrainians don't need to be at the table, that they shouldn't be at the table because they don't want them there to advocate for themselves. So I think that's what Trump's padding for, right? And he's done all this, right? And now they're giving a deal that's like, look, if you want to continue to get the lifeblood of the ammunition for these artillery guns we've already given you, so you can continue to use the stuff we've given you, then you need to sign away a large portion of your mineral wealth. You need to sign away a large portion of your mineral wealth without negotiation. I could see Trump easily doing something like that. Trump sees himself as a hardball negotiator, and I could definitely see him trying to just grab as many resources out of this, try to get something back for the United States. But I mean, like, a security priority is already getting something back for the United States. We can get other things back for the United States, but I mean, right now, you know, time is of the essence. If they didn't have a plan, dragging this out until you can figure out how to bleed Iraq dry, how to somehow bleed a little bit more wealth out of this country that's going to already have a hard enough time rebuilding. I don't think that's the important thing to do right now. I really don't think it is. A lot of this can be worked out later, you know, when you don't have some of the most critical portions of the war going on right now. You know, the battle for Pokrovsk is still going on. And they need men, and what they need for men is they need armored vehicles, they need ammunition, and they need assistance and training. And if they end up going through with some sort of ceasefire or peace deal, even though I think a ceasefire is much more likely, Zelensky is finally putting a number to what he thinks would need to be stationed in Ukraine in order for this to work. And that number is 1.5 million men in order to defend Ukraine and stop the Russians from invading again. Now, mind you, 1.5 million men is a lot of men. It is a lot of men. And I understand that, like, for hearing it that way, it's like, God damn, that's a really big request for them to supplement the Ukrainian armed forces to the point that they have those many men, because they don't even have those many men right now. But you need to understand, what's being discussed publicly right now and conceded publicly right now is stuff like no NATO membership. And if you look in Europe, the one thing that has really worked to stop your country from getting invaded is NATO. If you're Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, many of the arguments applied to ideologically justify and strategically justify an invasion of Ukraine, the presence of NATO membership, or the possibility of, like, them, like, breaking away from the Russian world, Russian speakers being there, that they think that they, like, a lot of this also applies, but they have NATO membership. They are part of an alliance that's 1 billion strong. And so they don't need 1.5 million soldiers to be there. They just need, like, a couple dozen Americans to remind them that if they invaded, you ain't pulling out of a war with Uncle Sam. And that's supposed to be the point. Supposed to have that deterrence effect, to make that gigantic military unnecessary, that giant station to be unnecessary. But if you don't have that alliance structure, which is what seems to be getting floated around by the defense secretary, then you're going to need an army that can physically resist the Russians if they invade, which means an army that can fight the Russians, one of the largest armed forces on the planet, serving the largest country on the planet. And at an army of 1.5 million strong, what Zelensky would essentially be doing is doubling the size of the Ukrainian armed forces to, because they're at like about 800,000, something like that, in order to match the size of the Russian armed forces. The Russians have 1.5 million, then we have 1.5 million. That seems to be his opening gambit. Now, maybe that number will move in the future. I'm sure both Trump and the Europeans will have different incentives to drag the number down. Trump will want to drag it down to make it an easier to obtain goal, and to make it more acceptable to the Russians, possibly. I could see that. I could also see the Europeans wanting to drag the number down because they don't want the physical constraints of how much it's going to cost to arm, equip, train, and station those troops in Ukraine. And of course, like the real risk to life and limb in a country so full of munitions and having a history of frozen conflicts becoming very hot conflicts, especially if it's a ceasefire, which is the most likely scenario. How's chat doing?